So now we're going to put a few more things together that we've already done. We've already talked about absolute value, and we've already done equations, and now we're just going to put those two concepts together. So let's start out with just a basic intro and a review of some of the absolute value we've already done. Remember, absolute value, when you see those bars right there, those straight bars mean absolute value. And the absolute value means the number of spaces from 0 on a number line. So I would read this problem as the absolute value of -5. And absolute value means I'm asking, what is the number of spaces from 0 to -5 on the number line? When I'm asking the absolute value of 2, I'm asking how many spaces does it take to get from 0 to 2? So right here, if I have the absolute value of -5, I'm asking from -5 to 0, how many spaces are in between? Well, from 0, I have -1, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. So when they ask me what's the absolute value of -5, the answer is 5, because -5 is 5 spaces away from 0. So the absolute value of 2, well, to get from 0 to 2, how many spaces are in between, would just be 2. So then it gets a little trickier. Now they say the absolute value of n, which remember we just put a variable when we don't know a number. So I need to find out what can I take the absolute value of and get 5 for an answer. Well, if we look back over here, remember the absolute value of -5 got us 5. So I could say the absolute value of -5 gets me 5, which is what I wanted. But there's actually more than just that answer. I could also take the absolute value of 5, and I still get 5 for an answer. So what they're asking me is, what is that n? What can go inside the absolute value bars? Well, inside the absolute value bars right here, I had a -5. And inside the absolute value bars right here, I had a +5. So n can actually be a +5 or a -5. And remember how we write that symbol, you could put n equals 5 or n equals -5, or we can just put that little symbol. Remember that means plus or minus. I could say n is equal to plus or minus 5. That plus or minus means a positive or a -5. So what if we had the absolute value of n is equal to 8? What they're asking me now is not what is the absolute value of 8. They're asking me what can I take the absolute value of and get 8 for my answer. Well, if I put an 8 in here, the absolute value of 8 will get me 8. Anything else? The absolute value of -8 will also get me 8. So what can n equal inside these absolute value bars? Well, n can equal that +8 or that -8. So I would write n equals plus or minus 8. Well, so what if I asked the absolute value of something should get me a -2? Well, most people would say, okay, how about a 2? Well, the absolute value of 2 gets me a +2. That's not what it's asking me for here. It's asking me for a negative. So let's try the absolute value of -2. Well, hang on a second. The absolute value of -2 is still 2. That's still not getting me what I actually want. In order to get a negative answer when you have absolute value, remember absolute value is counting the number of spaces. Well, we don't count with negatives, so the absolute value should always equal a positive. The only way to get a negative answer is if I had a negative on the outside of the absolute value bars. Because according to order of operations, this would be my grouping, and I would do the grouping first and then deal with the negative. So if there's not a negative on the outside of those absolute value bars, you can't get a negative answer. Well, what do we put if you can't do it? That's when we put no solution. And remember, we can abbreviate that as NS. So when I'm trying to find what I can take the absolute value of to get a number, remember we can take the absolute value of a positive or we can take the absolute value of negative and we'll still get a positive for our answer. But the only way to get a negative answer with absolute value is you have to have a negative on the outside of the absolute value bars.